My name's Steve Torsa. I'm the Managing Director and Co-Founder of Wholesale Investor. Just wanted to do this video today to really sort of talk about what we see as the future of Wholesale Investor. Obviously, this last few weeks has been absolutely wild, specifically the last week. We're sitting here March 22nd, and it just feels like every day, it is like another sort of week or month that's unfolding. But as I go through this, I just want to make you aware, I will be looking down a bit. I do have some notes that I really want to cover as part of sort of going through some of the key points. Firstly, the thing to really highlight is that when you go through experiences like this, it's really important that obviously there's some important decisions that you have to make, and also the execution of them really quickly is quite important. For me, as much as I want to communicate this video as far as about our future, it's also about what role you can actually play in helping us continue to build this ecosystem. We're lucky that every single, I feel like I'm living two different experiences at the moment. One is the one where, I'm sure like you go into the news and it's just nothing but bad news, and it's obviously, it's sort of, it's hyped up to there's a certain amount of anxiety that goes along with that information. Then on the other part, I'm having conversations with you guys, with other investors and other founders, and there's, even though we're all incredibly well aware of what challenges we're about to, we're experiencing now or about to experience, there's an underlying optimistic nature. And I remember this from myself personally, as far as from our history. As far as our history goes, we launched from the week of October 4 to October 8 in 2008. And in that week we saw the Dow Jones drop 18%, and very similar to last week. And we remember at that time, everyone was worried about the entire banking system collapsing. What I remember from that period was just effectively the optimistic nature of who we're dealing with. So for that part, I said, I love the space that we get to operate in. And as part of me sort of in communicating this during this video, it said, I want to honor that part of every single one of you that is optimistic about, firstly, the innovations that are coming out of this space, and also the potential. We understand that there's absolutely going to be some challenging times for some companies and also from investors. I said our role is still always remains the same. We are passionate about building this ecosystem and doing everything we can from our perspective. So a couple of things I really want to highlight as far as, if you talk about our history, I mentioned about sort of starting October 2008. We actually started out as a magazine. That was really Wholesale Investor 1.0. And we did that sort of till about mid-2012. And in mid-2012, we stopped the magazine and moved into what would be sort of almost our sort of 2.0, where we started focusing around online and also events, because we realized that what we had accidentally done was accidentally built an ecosystem, and that ecosystem had three parts. It had the investor, it had the company, and it also had the industry. And we know that each three parts play a role in building this ecosystem and building this marketplace. And 2014, we started taking companies overseas. We first started taking to Singapore, then UK, and also Hong Kong. And we've been, I think, something like 8 different countries or something sort of after that. But we've been very proactive in trying to take Australian innovation overseas. But what amazes us is how much interest and how much attention Australian companies have received. I know for myself alone, I've got shareholders from 6 different countries on my register, and I know there's a lot of other Australian companies that also have that similar experience. There's an amazing amount of money that actually flows into Australian companies from overseas. So that's sort of 2016, we had Investec become a shareholder. Now Investec's a London Stock Exchange listed investment bank. That was a significant milestone for us, and we just cannot thank enough for their support and how they've helped us, not only in us building our business, but also in growing the emerging company ecosystem as well. 2017, we had BMY Group, which is a financial media and also investment group out of Melbourne, and have also been fundamental in helping build, in helping sort of back and invest into early stage companies and pre-IPO companies in this area. In 2019, this is when the real shift started to happen for us, is we noticed that effectively the market and the ecosystem was quite fragmented, right? And we thought to ourselves, how can we actually build a platform which brings this ecosystem together? But more than that, we saw that online platforms were trying to charge sort of 6 to 8%. We also realized that there was a lot of frustration in the ecosystem in general. So this is when we started thinking about CRIISP, and CRIISP stands for Capital Raising Intelligent Investment Secondary Platform. The idea from us is, how do we actually help the entire ecosystem save time, save money, and improve efficiency? and do it via an end-to-end platform, right, that is completely subscription based. And that was the ambition we started out with CRIISP. So, for me, when I look at what is for us going forward, there's two parts, right? Crisis has two parts. One is the problem, the second one is the opportunity. The problem is we can't do events, right? So this about a week and a half ago, I think it was, we actually had to cancel London. So we had an entire week of activities scheduled for London that had to be cancelled. In fact, it feels like a lifetime ago that we were thinking about going, but it was literally only 2 weeks ago. Also, we had to cancel Sydney and Melbourne activities as well, right? And that's obviously a challenge because a lot of how you have come to engage with us and how have come to interact with us, there's a part of that that relates to events. In fact, a lot of our shareholders first actually met us via events. A lot of our corporate partners did as well. But we realized that in that problem, there's also now an opportunity. And that opportunity represents for us one of the greatest step forwards that we could possibly have in how we can actually serve this ecosystem and what we could do going forward. Right, so for me, one of the first things, before I really sort of delve into what I want to talk about as far as from the opportunity part, I want to highlight for what I see as some of the fears I have for the actual ecosystem in general. The first part is I published something on my LinkedIn a few days ago where it talked about the growth. It's called the Venture Dashboard. It was actually published on an Australian government website. And it really showed the highlighted growth of venture capital in Australia. Now, of course, not all the information is recorded about what takes place in this space, but it was a good idea. And effectively what it highlighted was that in 2019, we saw as much capital go into the actual ecosystem of what initially did from 2006 to 2013. So in 1 year, you saw as much capital go into an ecosystem as what it did when we were in the period that we were starting across 7 years. That is how much this space has grown in that period. Between the government support, the corporates, the incubators, the accelerators, the co-working spaces, all that makes a difference, right? And obviously the different VC funds that have been established, the more family offices join the area, the investment groups, the people that have actually made money from the space and are now reinvesting to it. This space has grown exponentially over that last period. The biggest fear I have from an ecosystem perspective is how long it took to build and how easily that can disappear. And some of the fears that I'll highlight, and I know that they're working on this, and I know some of you that are involved that will be working on it, but given that today they've obviously just released the second stimulus budget, you can imagine that state government and federal government budgets are going to be stretched. So therefore, you've got the issue that specifically for our area relates to startups and innovation. There's a likelihood that they could potentially pull back on funding for the area. So if you're starting off with governments pulling back on funding, you're absolutely going to have some of the corporates pulling back on funding. So I'm sure you're going to have a lot of the different corporate accelerators and incubation programs that have previously been funded having their challenges or having their budgets pulled from that area. Right, now they're the first two components. Then you've got these, I believe if you think about how many funds are actually raising money right now, that's also going to present a challenge for those, especially if they're first-time fund managers. It's going to be a lot harder for them to actually raise the funds that they want. Now, those funds are obviously getting ready to be deployed into other companies, right? So, for me, they're the first ones that I sort of highlight as potential areas. Now, as far as how VCs will respond to this, that will be really interesting for me to see as well. It'll be really interesting to see if they're still going to be proactively looking for new companies to invest into, or if they're just going to be doing follow-on investments into their existing companies. I'm sure they're in a similar position where they've got some companies which are going to have challenging times through this position, and then they're going to have other companies which are going to be absolutely flying. The reality is it's going to be hard for any companies to go through an IPO at the moment, so the exit via an IPO could be a challenging time for some of the companies, which has previously been the other third angle, I suppose, for venture investment into the space where they're actually listing onto the Australian Stock Exchange. So that is an avenue I can imagine is fairly much shut at this stage, right? So they're some of the first initial fears that I have. Now, what I am grateful for about our part is that, look, we understand that for companies that are going to raise money, they're going to have to negotiate more. It may take a little bit longer than what they were expecting. They'll definitely have to speak to more people. Some of the people that were let's say, some of the people that were looking to put money in this area may decide not to now because they may have been impacted on the capital markets. The other thing I've realized from this last week is there's a lot of investors in this space that aren't as impacted as what most people would expect, because a lot of their companies tied up in private investment opportunities, right? So I think that's a really good thing to highlight, and you may be one of those as you're actually listening to this. And also, I think there's a role for investors to play in the way in which they work with their companies, because it's all too easy. I said, when in challenging circumstances like this, I said I do love the actual nature of the people we work with, because your first thing is how do you get behind and how do you support the companies which you're working with as a first step, and obviously we encourage that. And also we encourage obviously the flexibility in the deal making, and also there's an understanding that valuation profiles may change over that period. What we do ask though is from the investor side is there is that potential to be a little bit predatory. And I sort of did a great interview with Steve Baxter where he sort of asked for investors not to take that sort of predatory approach with companies, provide that flexibility and help them work through this situation, help them work through their business models and so forth so that they can make their changes. So there's the sort of first things I want to talk about. As I mentioned, for us personally, we started out as a magazine, then 2.0 was transformed into online events. 3.0 literally was forced upon us in the last 2 weeks, right? So to give you some context for us, our core values as a company is firstly excellence, secondly teamwork, and thirdly thoughtfulness. They are the three principles that will drive us through this period, and from our perspective, we want to make sure that none of that changes as we're actually going forward. From how we're looking to build the business going forward, obviously for the last sort of 18, 19 months, we've been building CRIISP, right? And that's going to be a real centralized. The simple focus of CRIISP was how do you get the entire transaction online? And that was the idea. And obviously we've been able to do that, and we're obviously seeing plenty of money flow into companies on the platform already. Even since we held emergence on Feb 28. If you think about what's happened since Feb 28, we're seeing our clients complete transactions even since that event. And that is, once again, fundamentally what's beautiful about the space that we operate in. But we did realize a few years ago that effectively the system we're operating in is firstly, what we need to do is come up with a solution that helps the ecosystem save time, save money, and improve efficiency. Because we realize that effectively how most people are going about what they're doing on a capital raising perspective, first we've got a very fragmented ecosystem. Everyone's trying to compete and do their own thing. Secondly, the second part is we needed something where obviously we're not charging 6 to 8%. It had to be subscription based. Effectively, we know a lot of the industry is still working off manual processes, and also they're still working off isolated solutions. So the solution we wanted, firstly, we knew it had to be software driven. We knew it had to be ecosystem enabled. We knew that it had to provide detailed analytics for companies as well. We knew that the investor connectivity and really driven by AI and matchmaking was going to be an important component. And then also we knew that access to investors was important with that. Now obviously we've built a substantial database in that time, right? So that was something that we're already bringing to it from a platform perspective. And as I articulated in one of the videos sort of at Emergence, was that what we want to build with CRIISP is effectively digital investment banking for SMEs. So if you think about most SMEs, they don't get the opportunity to work with an investment bank because the cost structure for an investment bank effectively doesn't allow them to provide that. But software has that ability where it can allow that for a solution. So in fact, tools like being able to use book builds, syndications, obviously capital raising is part of it, secondary sales, access to different potentially SME debt providers, or etc. We believe the role in which software can actually play in doing that, and that's what we've sort of given ourselves the mission of building with the platform. And if you want to understand what the actual mission for Wholesale Investor is, it's really simple. Every day we wake up where everything for us is about creating an opportunity for tomorrow. That is the fundamental that sits at the core for us. Every email we send, this video that I'm doing right now, every event that we've done, every virtual event that we're about to host, everything about that is about creating an opportunity for tomorrow. And how we do that is by utilizing technology, by utilizing platforms, and also by working with partners. And that's they're the areas, the collaboration with partners is really the key area that we want to double down going forward. So if you want to understand, they're the key things as far as for us. Obviously a completely end-to-end capital raising solution that's utilizing AI for matchmaking, and then obviously the digital investment bank for SMEs, but driving off those core principles of how do we help our founders save time, save money, and improve efficiency in the process. So for me, that is what represents the future of CRIISP. Now what I want to do is I want to talk about the future of WI. So for us, as I mentioned, the problem with this scenario is we can't run events, right? And obviously, most of you, it's a really interesting thing. You would obviously get the communications from us. You obviously would have got this via one of our emails. The reality is 80 to 90% of what we do is actually online. But people remember the face-to-face, the interaction at our live events. They know that we're able to, each year we have over 5,000 people come out to our live investor events because we have such an engaged ecosystem, right? Which is something beautiful. Now we'll be taking that entire ecosystem online. So over the next couple of weeks, we'll be actually doing our first virtual showcase. And what this situation has forced us to do is to basically take our entire business digital. Right, so from the virtual showcasing right through to the transaction will be completely done online. And that is obviously powerful. What it means for us is obviously global distribution with our key areas being Australia, Singapore and the UK straight off the bat. Secondly, what that means is we can integrate how we're looking to do our showcasing with CRIISP. So it means that you as an investor can engage directly with the companies during their presentation. Right, so you can get instant response, instant feedback, and be looking at their deals instantly. The other part is that for us, it allows us to seamlessly do what we do. Right, we will be changing aspects to it. We will absolutely make mistakes in what we're doing. What we ask is that number one, you support us. Number two, you help us actually bring new partners to this space. We are open to collaborate with the entire ecosystem, whether it be company related, investor related, or industry related. We know each of you play a role. We know each of you are also concerned about what's happening in the marketplace. And the fundamental thing that we know is that if we can do what we do, then it can help play a role in making a difference for everybody, because fundamentally money still needs to move, right? And effectively, companies are going to shine, companies are going to struggle. The reality is you as investors can make a difference in doing that. You as deal makers can make a difference in helping with those companies either way. Because whenever this market bounces back, we know that you guys will be the ones in the ideal positions, for those companies, right? I've said, but we absolutely understand the challenges ahead. So we're a business and we have 18 staff. So like every one of you, we also have team members that, that rely on us. What I can assure from our side is we'll be doing absolutely everything we can to continue to try and build the ecosystem, but as well as deliver for our clients and deliver you investment opportunities, right? But more importantly is we want to keep the standard as far as excellence, thoughtfulness, right, and teamwork. So over this next period, you will notice changes from our side. We'll be opening up the doors for collaboration with different groups, whether you be equity related, debt related, industry related, or just basically looking or investor related, or even internationally. So for us, this is such an important time in which we can obviously streamline the way in which we take our clients globally and also bring different ecosystems together via our online platforms. Really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this video. I look forward to working with you all in the future, and I'll hopefully see you at one of our virtual events shortly. Thank you.